Hey everyone, and welcome back to our DC Films podcast, episode 10, where all we're going to talk about this episode is, our appreciation for Ben Affleck and his portrayal as Batman. And joining me today is, some familiar faces as well as someone new. She'll be joining us here a little later, but so for the people who are here, if you guys want to go around and reintroduce yourselves to the listeners.
I'm Danielle. I'm a social justice league on Tumblr.
Hey, I'm Lily from Lily Loves Comics on Tumblr.
Hi, I'm Jean from Bat Activity on Tumblr.
And I'm Katie. I'm Story Advocate on Tumblr.
All right, thank you guys for taking the time to do this today. I know it's always an issue trying to get all of us together on the same schedule, considering we're all from different parts of the country and the world. So thanks, as always, for taking the time to do this. So this week, the focus is Ben Affleck's Batman, and it's funny because we planned on doing this actually a couple weeks ago, but then we also discussed last week the importance of romance and love in the DCEU, and then we kind of flip-flopping on which issue to cover. And I think this is more of a timely discussion or timely subject because it just hit the 4-year mark of the announcement of Ben Affleck as Batman. I kind of want to just get started with asking the group, and you guys each go around and kind of talk about what were your immediate reactions when you first found out Ben Affleck was cast as Batman?
Okay, when I heard, I was a little. I wasn't always on board. I'm not gonna lie. But I didn't hate it. I thought that I was like, okay, where is this going? What kind of Batman is he gonna play? Was my first reaction because I was like, he's a bit kind of old to be playing that origin story. So I'm kind of glad they went with a different direction. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's just me. I didn't really think much of it until pictures and the trailers, teasers came out and completely changed my opinion, like a 360. It was amazing for me, anyway.
I don't know. I'm rarely a person who freaks out on the first casting. They announce the casting, and I go, okay, I'll wait and see what happens. Yeah, it's just too early to tell for me, and I like to wait until I see the finished product. But sure enough, he got cast, and I was like, okay. We'll see how that goes. And so I was never opposed, and I was never like, oh my gosh, that'll be terrible, like somebody like the internet exploded. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I sat down in that movie, and holy crap, all I could think was, this is not a Batman I have ever seen before, and I like it. Like, I don't know, for me, he's like the definitive Batman now. Mm-hmm. I've seen all the Batman films growing up, you know what I mean? I love Batman. Batman's awesome, and he's been my big superhero for a long time, so I've seen lots of different iterations, and then suddenly it was this guy, and I was like, oh, he's so real to me. He's so 360. He's so, wow, so yeah, I like him. That's my Batman.
Right. Okay, I guess my story is a bit different because I was definitely much later to the Batman party. About the time when he was cast, I was just getting into Batman comics, so I wasn't really familiar with the Batman movies before that. Yeah. So, Ben was really my first cinematic Batman. So when I heard about his casting, I just went, all right, let's see where this goes. And then when all the trailers and stuff started coming out, and we got to see his Bruce Wayne, and it was just pretty much ripped straight out of the comics way more than any other cinematic Batman that had ever happened before. And so I just that became the Batman for me. That's the definitive cinematic Batman for me. Really, all the previous Batmans are amazing in their own ways, but given that it was my first, and given that out of all the portrayals, this one is really the closest to the comics, it was just amazing. And yeah, that's just my impression of Ben's Batman.
Yeah, agreed.
I've loved Ben for a long time, so I was ready to be in his corner. I'm with Kevin Smith here. If you're casting Jaws, cast Ben Affleck to play the shark. I don't care. I've loved him a lot, and I think my perception of it was a little bit different because I'd heard so much from him personally, and it felt really sort of intimate with him, and I know that he's just a giant giant geek. Like, I know that, like, this, like, it was exciting to me because I knew that, and this is my only qualification for DCEU cast members, I knew that this is what Ben wanted, and I knew that it was a dream coming true. I knew it was so big for him, and he wouldn't disrespect this opportunity. So I was really excited about that. I wrote a little bit about how exciting it was that they picked someone who definitely was pandering to a attracted to men audience. He's really beautiful, and that's something that I don't think a lot of directors prioritize when they cast Batman, which I think is a huge mistake. Batman being gorgeous is 9/10 of the comic for me, anyway.
Yeah.
And I think the only thing that I was worried about was his age, and I think that the only context in which I worried about that was how it would affect the story. I think that I was really worried about us putting a Batman that was 10 years older than Superman into the story in order to teach him a lesson. You know, I felt like that was a likely way that they might go with that story, and that's what I was super worried about when the announcement happened. I was like crap, is this going to be another thing where we're just like, you know, spending a whole movie knocking down Superman?
Yeah, and I remember when I first saw the news, at first I was like, I honestly didn't believe it. I'm like, oh, here we go, like another Batman rumor. And then like everyone's reporting it, and then I'm like, oh, this is true. Like Ben Affleck's actually Batman, and like at the time, like I'm a very open-minded person. Like I'm not the type of person to like be like, I'm gonna write a petition because this is awful and Obama needs to get rid of Ben Affleck as Batman. Like that was the most idiotic thing that came out of the whole thing. Like I understand, like honestly, like movie fans are some of the most passionate people ever. And how they got the whole Ben Affleck being Batman situation so wrong, and it was just embarrassing. And now so many of them look back in it, like, again, for most people who don't like Batman versus Superman, 9 out of 10 people will say they enjoy Ben Affleck's Batman or his portrayal as Batman. So the fact that the people ate their words, like, hey, it goes to show that you don't judge a book by, like, they don't judge something before you see it, you know. So for me, like, I was never, like, against him being Batman. I was always for it. Because I remember at the time, and this was, like, I would say 8 or 9 months after those initial rumors that, like, Warner Brothers was talking about having Ben Affleck come in and direct the Justice League movie. And this was, like, years ago. And I remember, like, reading that, I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, like, at the time, this is coming out after his Oscar win for Argo. And I was like, oh, hey, that's fine. If he did a good job directing that, if he directs Justice League well, that'll be fine. And obviously, he didn't end up directing Justice League, but now we know that he's actually in Justice League as Batman. So for me, like, it wasn't shocking. I mean, it was, but it also wasn't because of what I read at the time. But I was always trying to keep him open-minded. I'm like, hey, like, he seems like he's the right age from what I would want Batman to be, because I was always worried about, like, who they would cast as a young Batman. I'm like, okay, are we going to go through the whole origin story thing again? Are we going to do this whole, like, young Batman kind of thing? And, like, I was honestly worried because, like, there are very few actors who I think can actually embody Batman. Like, I look at past Batman movies, like, I look at, like, the Tim Burton ones, for example, and movies are okay to me. Like, I think, as a fan, like, I came into those a little late in my life, so I think they're a little overrated for what I was expecting.
Yeah.
But and Michael Keaton was okay, but to me, he didn't embody Batman. And then I go on to like Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. Like, even though as flawed as those movies are, I think Val Kilmer and George Clooney both are. I see a good Bruce Wayne in both of them, but I think at the same time they both don't embody Batman to me. And then we got Christian Bale, who blew everyone's minds because he brought Batman back to the height of pop culture. Like him and Christopher Nolan both, because Batman was kind of a joke because he had like the bat nipples and the bat credit card and all that stuff from the Schumacher movies. The Batman like literally became a joke, and Nolan and Bale kind of gave us a realistic interpretation of Batman that I still appreciate now and I loved at the time. But like after watching Ben's portrayal as Batman, I'm a little spoiled because now I'm like, well, Ben is my Batman. Ben is the person I see as Batman when I read comics. He's the one I imagine as Batman now. Like, he
Yeah,
embodies
true.
what Batman is supposed to be. Like, he doesn't, like... Again, I brought this up in the past where, like, I think there are some problems with Christian Bale's Batman. Not in, like, in his performance at all, but just his Batman, it just, I think, is a little too isn't as self-reliant as I would want him to be. Like, you don't feel like he's, like, the world's greatest detective, and he's not, like, as cunning as he is in the comics. And it wasn't a horribly bad thing, but I look at Bruce Wayne and Batman vs. Superman, and I see he's a lot more capable on his own and with Alfred than he was in the Dark Knight trilogy, at least for me. So for me, I can walk away from Batman vs. Superman and be like, again, this is my Batman, and Ben and Zach are responsible for that. And despite what anyone says, I think, even with the killing that happened in the movie, I still think this is the most realistic interpretation of Batman we've ever gotten, because if you look at, and again, something else that I brought up, if you look at Christian Bale's Batman, one of my problems with him was that he was kind of, if you look at The Dark Knight, he was kind of already willing to give up the mantle of Batman. So, for me, even in Batman v Superman, you can see he's lost a Robin, he's lost one of his wards, one of his sons, and he's still fighting the fight. You know, as far as we know, he didn't give up, and he lost big time, and in the Dark Knight movies, you see he was willing to give up over a woman, and that's not inherently a bad thing. But to me, that's not Batman. That's not something Batman. I don't think he would really do. So, with Ben Affleck as Batman, I personally think, and I'm just gonna keep sounding like I'm saying the same thing again and again, but he did something so amazing with the role. Like, I think, and there are some people who are still like, oh, why couldn't we have just gotten Christian Bale as Batman? I don't think Christian Bale's Batman would have fit at all in this universe. In a world of monsters and aliens and magic and metahumans, what would Christian Bale's Batman have been able to do? Like, no, seriously, it's a serious question. Like, I'm curious, like, how he would have fit in this universe, because I just don't see him fitting all that well, despite what some people say. Yeah. So I think,
I can't see him fitting.
Yeah. So for me, I love what they were able to do with this interpretation of Batman. So I'm always going to appreciate Ben Affleck's Batman, even if at some point Ben Affleck leaves for whatever reason, you know, with all the rumors and stuff about him wanting out, or whatever Casey Affleck is joking about him leaving or whatever. If any of that ends up being true, it's going to suck, but hey, at least I could say he was my Batman for a time.
Yep.
And I'll always appreciate that aspect of him.
Yeah.
We'll have 2 movies with him if that's all we get, and that's still better than nothing. But I would take far more, by the way. Hint, hint.
He's not going anywhere.
I agree.
No.
It's just that, you know, should things change, I'm grateful for what I have. But no, going back to the Dark Knight trilogy, I really think, like, it's so weird because they spent a lot of time in the trilogy talking about kind of like Batman consuming Bruce and, you know, and yada, yada, yada. And yet the funny thing was, I never really saw that happening. And then we sit down and watch Batman v Superman, and just without even seeing all the 20 years before that he's been doing this, you realize how much Batman has consumed him, to the point where he doesn't even want to go to a party as himself to get information. He just wants to go in as the Bat. And, you know, like, he has to dust off his persona to go in and do it, and you can tell he just hates it. He just hates it. And it's fascinating to me to watch how that's like, I don't know how to describe it right, except that you're right, like, ripped straight out of the comics. And I have read very few Batman comics, but my dad did have a book, and I read some of those as a kid. And one of them was the Ruddy Dark Knight Rises, and I was like, what is this? You know? So there was, I don't know, it's wild to look at it and realize you get such a sense of the 20 years he's already done. And we're just coming into this movie now. Like, we don't even need the films before. I would totally watch them. But we don't have to have them in this movie to get a picture of the fact that he's been doing this for 20 freaking years. He has lost people. He's seen everybody go bad. He's watched the criminals just pop back up again and again and again as he tries to take them out. You get an entire sense of that with him, and it's just fascinating to watch. I don't know. I felt like Ben did an amazing job with that. Him and Zach together are like the perfect combo for me and Batman, because it just felt so very, very real, and I was so impressed. And yeah, I was never a doubter, but wow, I was gung ho after I saw it. Ben has done a remarkable job, just amazing.
Yeah, just to bring back the comparison to Christian Bale's Batman, which is that Bale's Batman always seemed to view Batman as, in a way, a means to an end. You know, like he had a goal, he had a point where he would stop. He had like something that would stop him, and like the Batman persona was just that. It was a persona. You know, maybe like the way that Bruce Wayne was a persona for him. Whereas like for Ben's Batman, we can see really clearly like how all three personalities just blend together. You know, it's not just Batman pretending to be Bruce Wayne. It's not Bruce Wayne pretending to be Batman. It's Batman is Bruce Wayne is Batman. It's something in between when the mask is off, but he's not in society. You know, like there's a part of him that's Batman. There's a part of him that's Bruce Wayne, but the real him is somewhere in between those two, and that's always been Batman's struggle. And I think that's like the most important thing when crafting this particular Batman for this universe, because that's the way you explain how Batman becomes something so ingrained in him, but also without completely consuming him. Like this is how he's come to cope with it. This is how like it's shaped him over the course of 20 years, and like this is the exact kind of personality it would create, such that, you know, he could be Batman, he could continue to be Batman, but he could also, you know, recover enough that he could, I don't know, raise children, and he could work with others. You know, if Bale's Batman tried to be inserted into the current Justice League universe, he just wouldn't be able to work with anyone. Like, even within his own movie, he's always he's like a loner. You know, like the entire personality is built on his own isolation and such. Whereas, like, in order for the Justice League universe to work at all, you have to have a Batman who is inherently able to work with others. He has to be the Batman who can be the start of the Bat family, who can, like, be well enough to take in a 12-year-old Dick Grayson and raise him to be Robin. You know? I don't know. Like, I just think that Ben's Batman they took a special care with Ben's Batman, and like something I appreciate Zack so much for is just like building up this particular character psychology of like, we can totally believe that like over the course of his 20 years he might have been at some point well enough that, you know, he could have had his Robin, and this is just, you know, the result of the culmination of all that, and not just his parents' trauma. Yeah.
Well, I think Robin is the difference, and I think that's what made a really big difference for me as far as his portrayal. He's the second Batman, I guess third live-action Batman to have a Robin, and that makes a big difference. I think that it even brings some Adam West to the role, and I think that people are really mad that I'm comparing Batfleck to Adam West, but it's true. Like, I felt very parented by Adam West. Adam was my first Batman, and I felt very, very like secure in that. And I think that, you know, we get that immediately in Batman versus Superman. The first thing that you see is just him booking through the city, but like also like helping random people. And, you know, like, I think that the biggest statement that's made in that movie is that, like, the third thing we see Batman do is hug a freaking orphan. Like, I mean, like, it's they decide who he is, and that was very much that called back to the Adam West feeling for me, and it made me it put me immediately at ease with the portrayal, and I wasn't worried about it from that point on. Like, he hugs an orphan, and I'm like, okay, we're in. It's Batman. You got me.
Yep. Totally agree.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point to bring up too, because I think the Dark Knight trilogy, in certain aspects, they were too afraid to kind of go out there, especially with the Robin character. That's why ultimately Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character was only like an homage to Robin. Like, with the whole thing at the end where he turns out his first name is Robin, and that's kind of it. And, like, there were aspects of, like, you see like a little bit of like Tim Drake in there, and like a little bit of Dick Grayson, but that character is it's an homage more than anything else. But, like, again, I think Nolan was looking at that world and, like, a Robin wouldn't fit in that world. It's not realistic enough. But when you look at Batman vs Superman, Robin, there is no Robin in this universe. I mean, there is, obviously he was killed at some point, but we don't see a Robin in this film, and yet his presence is felt in Bruce's...
Absolutely.
Like, and seeing how damaged Bruce is just from the implied loss of Robin. Like,
yeah.
That speaks to me so well. Like, you don't even, like... It's one of the things we keep bringing up is, you know, like, speaking without saying anything. Like, just seeing like, when he looks at the bat suit, and then when he turns and looks at Robin's suit and with the graffiti on it, like, you see how much that has truly affected him and what he is doing. Like, like, that's why, like, Zack's storytelling, it's so subtle and going back to what people have said in the past, but, like, it's like, oh, I don't get it, it's just too much or whatever. Like, I don't need to be spoon-fed story details. Like, for me, I can see what he's trying to say in that by showing Robin's suit without, like, we didn't need someone to play Robin in Batman vs Superman. Like, it wasn't necessary. Like, we got an amazing film without a Robin, but you can still feel Robin's influence on that story. I think that's also what makes this Batman so much different than Christian Bale's, obviously, is that he was willing to have someone there fight with him, and he lost that person. And it shows what does that do to a man, and how far is he willing to go to, like, and we see who he just becomes so, like, absorbed into being Batman that he doesn't really see a life outside of being Batman anymore. It's like, and it's like you guys said, he doesn't, like, even enjoy doing the whole Playboy persona anymore. He's kind of over it seems like. You know, like, and when there's that line when Lex is at the party, like, you know, we finally got you over the harbor, and, like, it goes to, like, it seems like he hasn't really been out as Bruce for a long time.
Oh no!
I mean, it's really gorgeous because, like, I mean, we talk a lot about Batman and depression, but none of the live-action Batman have really had any mental illness necessarily. A couple of them probably seemed like, I think that you could say that they had PTSD, but for the most part, we're looking at, like, a really stark portrayal of functional depression. And it's really great because you can see just sort of the mask of, oh, this is what it looks like when people enjoy things, you know, the way, like, you know, is this a normal human smile kind of face that he makes? And then the enjoyment is sucking out of his body. Like, that sort of, like, emptiness is a huge part of that portrayal. And I think that it's really gorgeous because it really shows you, what Batman's about. Like, I mean, like, he's part of this sort of, like, this story of mental illness and the landscape and all of those themes of his story. He's involved in that. Like, if you know, I mean, like, if you put everyone with mental illnesses inside Arkham, Batman is going in there with them. And I think that Ben's portrayal has been more clearly mentally ill than any Batman before him, and I think that that's a lot of what the problem people have with it is.
Yeah. You know what the most beautiful thing is that pretty much none of everything we've been saying was explicitly stated on screen. Everything was just showing, and everything is what we can extrapolate from what Zack has given us. Just like few little tidbits and little shots and scenes in the movie. It's like, it's so beautiful that, like, you know, we can just from a few shots of Ben's Batman, we can just guess, like, his entire history as the Batman. You know, there's just, like, kudos to Zack as a filmmaker. He's brilliant.
You know, there's a major difference between watching something and loving it so much that you think about it so much that you then start reading in and finding other things to add to it, and then you end up with a whole bunch of little headcanons and stuff like that, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's awesome, and we all do it, and it's great, except that there is a difference between that and when the director clearly lays things out in order to give you cues and hints and keys along the way. And I hear so much babbling, I think I've mentioned this before, about show not tell in writing nowadays, but I swear some people don't even know what that means. Because they grouse about show me, don't tell me, but then when they get shown somehow they can't seem to figure it out, or they're not looking hard enough, or they didn't make it clear, and then they get all upset, and it's like, but you want
you asked for it.
You want to be told, and here you're right. Zach has made it extremely apparent. Nothing that we're talking about has been something that we've weeded out and tickled out of there as personal meta because it's showing women. No, it's right there. Like, I mean, even just the whole scene after, Alfred's like, he's been invited and hands him the invitation. And then it goes into that entire montage of him prepping to go. He doesn't want to go as Bruce Wayne. He stares at his bat suit and he's like seething with emotion. And then he puts all that away, looks at Robin and we all go, oh. And then upstairs he goes, takes a shower, washes the bat off, puts on his costume, so to speak. I'm using quote fingers. And then he takes the cover off of his car, pulls it off. It's been unused for how long? You're right. His persona of Bruce is barely utilized at this point. He doesn't leave there often because he's too consumed with doing the bat one. He wants the bat. The bat is who he knows. The bat is where he's comfortable. And all of that is right there, staring at you in the face, being presented to you, shown to you on screen, and we all go, oh. And you get a really gorgeous sense of his personality and his character at this point in time, without having to see flashback, without having to see Alfred turn to some non-existent person and go, or anything like that. No. It just all gets perfectly laid out. Oh. And it's just that simple. That is showing, not telling, and it's done very, very well. So, I don't know. I don't want people to come to me and fuss about being shown and not told anymore because that might have an effect. Just saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
Anyway, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful storytelling. And Ben, I think, I don't want to, name names. I can't even think of any names right now. But I don't think that every single actor on this planet could come in and take that kind of storytelling and be able to do it well. There's different levels of acting. There's different kinds of actors, and that's okay. But Zach was really good at zeroing in on the person who could do this well.
Yeah,
and
that's the thing about this kind of direction too, is that it's so dependent on the strength of those actors. And I think that nobody on the cast gets enough credit for what they're doing, because what they're doing is literally carrying the film. There's beautiful imagery, but the writing isn't carrying the film. The actors are. We're letting the actors take the lead, and I think that's another reason why Ben was such a good choice, is because he's extremely, extremely strong. He's going to bring a performance, and he has a huge screen presence, and that's all really important to this role.
Yep.
Yeah, I completely agree. So like I said earlier, there was someone here who is new to the podcast, so I'd like to introduce her. This is Amber, everyone. Amber, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey guys, I'm Amber, and you can find me on Tumblr at By Witch of the West, and on Twitter at Bitter Venezuelan, but I will let you guys know how to spell that.
Right. Thank you. So we were just so we got
I was having lunch.
So we were just kind of going on about our personal feelings on Ben Affleck as Batman, and we kind of started with our first reactions to him when he was first cast. So Amber, what were your first reactions when you first found out that Ben was Batman?
I was not really into comic books like I am right now, so I hadn't even seen Man of Steel when he was announced. So I wasn't into the comic books. I have seen Iron Man and all of these movies, but not particularly DC. So I wasn't into comic books like I am today. So when he was announced, I was like, well, okay. He's a really good actor, so I have to wait and see what he does with the part. So when I finally watched BBS. I haven't seen the theatrical cut because I didn't get the chance to actually go to the theater and support the movie. So I got the ultimate cut, and I just thought that Ben Blue, he killed it with the parts. So, and I think what I liked about him was that he was really good as Bruce Wayne, as the millionaire, the CEO of Wayne Enterprises, which we hadn't really seen much with Christian Bale or previous movies. I really liked how he personified Bruce Wayne. And then obviously his Batman is more lethal, more. I just think that Ben is like he jumped out of the comic book, and that's a testament to Zack Snyder and his vision. Yeah. What he wanted to do with the parts.
Yeah.
So that's my general thoughts.
Yeah, and we've all kind of felt that same way. We're like, again, like kind of like what I was telling everyone earlier. For me, like I was never against his casting. For me, like I've always been more open-minded like that. But again, it goes to show like what Zach and the crew are able to do. Like to me, to be able to take this character who just not too long ago just finished his trilogy of movies, to be able to kind of like revamp him into something completely different, and to give us a real like brutal and emotional and relatable gritty version of Batman. I think it was an impossible task to do, and I think Zack and Ben did it in spades. Like, if it were any other director, I would have been a little worried that it would have been just more of the same of what we would have gotten in Christian Bale's or even like Michael Keaton's or something. It wouldn't have stood out as much as Ben's has, you know? Oh, and also, even though Fatima unfortunately wasn't able to join us today, she did let me know that there were some thoughts of hers that she wanted to share. She wanted me to let you guys know that, you know, she loves Batman, or Ben Affleck's portrayal as Batman as well. It's her favorite, and she didn't think that anyone else could top Christian Bale's performance, and that she thinks people are way too harsh on him. He works so hard and has so many accomplishments, yet people hate on him and put pressure on him because he's taken on a character that made DC what it is today. And I really resonate with what she says. You know, unfortunately, she's not here to really delve into more into what she says, but, you know, Fat Man brings up a really good point that, you know, he really does, you know, have an impact on DC as it is today. And I think, despite what people say about Ben Affleck's portrayal as Batman, I think it really is, you know, a turning point in the DCEU into giving us a newer version of the character that maybe we didn't necessarily expect from Ben Affleck in what you probably would have, you know, coming out of the Dark Knight trilogy. Like for me, like I can sit in, like, that's why I was like so happy with like last year when we got Batman vs Superman and Suicide Squad back to back, that we got 2 movies of Ben Affleck's Batman in it back to back and so soon.
Yeah.
Like, even though, like, obviously Ben didn't have the biggest part in Suicide Squad, but in the parts he did, you still felt that performance there, even though they were more or less cameos. Like, in the scene with him capturing Deadshot, you still, like, he was there saying, like, it's over, Deadshot, I don't want to do this in front of your daughter. Like, go ahead.
And even in Suicide Squad, you can see his progress as a character.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning of BBS, you see him being more lethal, more aggressive. Punch you, and then we'll talk later. No, in Suicide Squad, you see him approaching him and saying, "Look, you have done this bad thing, and I'm gonna take you to jail." So you can see him being more thoughtful, more progressing. His character is progressing, even in a small scene in Suicide Squad, which is brilliant. You don't see that every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like again, it's and for a film that he was barely in. The goes show just the power of Ben's performance. Like, he didn't necessarily have to, like, any actor could have just like done a cameo and kind of like phoned it in and be like whatever, but like, to me, that scene, and then even like that post-credit scene with him and Amanda Waller, where he's telling her to shut it down. His friends are going to do it for you. Like, I felt the power in his performance in that scene, and that was just a little end credits thing just for the fans. And even in that, I still felt Ben's performance, and I just love what he's given us, and everything that he's done so far with Batman. I love, and that's why it's so frustrating as a fan. Like, for the last like 6-7 months, ever since he stepped down as the director for the Batman movie, like there's been so much worry about he really wants to leave as Batman. He's not gonna stay as Batman, everyone, and then everything that's been going on, and then last week. And then last week, Casey Affleck was on some podcast where he joked about, like, I don't think he's doing it. I just made that up. I don't know. And then people ran with that as news and saying, Casey Affleck said Ben Affleck's out as Batman.
Essentially, saying, I don't think that Batman's gonna be in the Batman. Like, it's a dumb joke. Like,
yeah, and it's like, and it's frustrating. Like, and we've, as a podcast, discussed the bias towards the hate towards DC and the media in general, but it's just still so frustrating. Like, let the guy live. Like, that's one of the reasons why he's probably so stressed out about all this stuff. And like, first of all, Ben already has a lot going on in his personal life. He's dealing with, like, he has to deal with, like, alcohol abuse issues and stuff like that. Like, he's already dealing with enough of his own stuff outside of being Batman as it is. And the media will not leave the guy alone. And then people are saying that, like, maybe he's drinking again because he realized how sucky Batman vs. Superman was, and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, give the guy a damn break. Like, seriously, like, it's just a movie, and you guys keep, like, hammering the guy, like, even when he was still directing the movie, every single interview he was in when he was promoting that movie of his, Live by Night, everyone was like, when's the Batman gonna come out? What are you doing with Batman? Are you done with the script yet? Why isn't it done yet? Or we're starting to get worried. Like, they wouldn't leave him alone, and then you can see why he wanted to step down. He's like, I can't do this. Like, he was just trying to promote his own movie, and he couldn't even do that without people being worried about the Batman. And it's just, I feel so bad for the guy. Like,
it's just so funny because when he was cast, he said, like, I'm a Hollywood dude, like, I'm prepared for, whatever's gonna happen, like, I've got a thick skin, and I mean, like, he's apparently really fun to hate. Like, he has a long history
but the difference is he didn't have
for no reason.
Yeah, and he didn't have those personal issues that we have heard about lately. So, I mean, if you were under normal circumstances, I think he would have been able to take it. But considering
it's a whole
all
other
of
level. It's a different
his personal issues with the substances and his personal life, so I think that it was just too much for him, and it's understandable.
Yeah, and
it's also hard after. I mean, I don't know. I always get here when we're talking about Ben, but like the theatrical cut of his Daredevil movie is a pretty solid film.
I think so too. Like, it's not as nearly as bad as people say it is.
The theatrical's not great, but the director's cut is fantastic. The director's cut is a good movie. Like, I'm evangelical about that director's cut. Like, I don't let anybody talk shit about Daredevil or Ben until they've seen that director's cut, because, like, I mean, we all have experience with studios cutting up our films, but like, to have that sort of like repeat on him in Batman versus Superman, I think that, I mean, like, a lot of his malaise in the post interviews was definitely about him being tired and about, like, not being used to, like, the rigor of that level of press coverage. But I think some of it was just like, God, shut up. Like, just leave me alone. Like, it's really annoying to go straight from everybody being like, oh, Daredevil was a huge mistake, to, this movie is the worst movie ever. Like, that's gotta be disappointing. Like, that was probably pretty rough.
Yeah, and even if, like, we don't even, like, know his true thoughts of, like, whether he thinks it's a good movie or not, he's an actor supporting the movie that he was in. Like, he's never come out and said it was a mistake, and yet people keep, like, badgering him about the stuff, and then the whole, like, sad Affleck thing that came out in the midst of all the Batman vs. Superman press.
So annoying.
That was annoying.
I don't know if anybody has heard his Armageddon director's commentary.
Oh, I heard from that one scene. Yeah, I've heard some of it.
That's pretty pure Ben. I mean, that's pretty pure. Like, I don't believe that he'd still be on the project if he didn't think that the work that he's doing was awesome and that this was a good movie. And I think we would have heard, like, this isn't self-preservation right now. Like, he doesn't need this job. And I think that we'd hear from him. I think we'd hear from him if he didn't like it, if he had some issues. And I think he's the one guy who came out and said the most coherent thing about the backlash. And he basically just said, like, I've never heard a film judged completely on tone before, and not understanding the difference between plot and tone, and not understanding that, like, you know, what happens in the movie is different from, like, the color of the film. Yeah,
and that's another criticism of the DCEU that I'm already tired of, and that's for another discussion. But again, I just feel so bad for not even just Ben, for these DCEU actors in general. Like, they're doing their best, and I think they're all doing great jobs. But fans feel so entitled that, like, they keep attacking these people, and all these, like, quote unquote reporters and quote unquote journalists keep, like, attacking Zach and Ben, and there's, like, excuse me, but they keep attacking them, and it's like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be professional, and you're attacking these people just because you don't like a movie? Excuse my language, but grow the fuck up. Like, it's like so frustrating. Like, you can't just not like a movie and then leave it be. You have to keep badgering, like, why are you still involved in these shitty movies and blah blah blah. It's
all the actors involved in the DCEU have been subjects to such viciousness.
Yep.
It's awful. I mean, the things they have said about Ben, about Henry, about Gal, I mean, it's just a mess. I don't understand. Okay, maybe you don't like the movies, okay, but that's it. You don't have to love them, but you don't have to get so personal and offensive about them as people. I mean, you hate the movie. I mean, they might have flaws, they might have not, but at least be conscious about the stuff that you're saying.
Yeah, it's like they want to punish them for making the movie, and it's like, it's just a movie. Like, at the end of the day, it's just a movie. Like, it's not worth, I mean, for me, I just look at it and I'm like, it's not worth, like, the chipping away of your soul. Like, you have to be a terrible person, you know, because a movie wasn't, you know, because you didn't like a movie.
Yeah, and that's and we had this sort of discussion, like, when we first started this podcast, you know, in the midst of everything going on with Zach after losing his daughter Autumn. And even now, like, it's at the time, a lot of people, even non-fans of the DCEU, came out and said, you know, they were supporting Zach and his decision. But and at the time, of course, there were people who were like, "Oh, thank God, Joss Whedon's here to direct." And now everyone who was kind of there for Zach is now like, "Oh, thank God that Joss is going to come in and he's going to re-shepherd the DCEU to be whatever it's going to be." And again, and it's just like, you can't just let the guy live. I can't. Some people, like, it's not even just trolling. It's just people who, like, do they really not have anything better to do with their time than to criticize a guy who just made a damn movie? Yeah. Like, this guy's, I think they forget that, like, just because that they're, like, in the media, that, like, they don't have lives. Like, these are human beings who lead normal lives outside of the DCEU and outside of these movies. Like, they're people just like you and me and all of us. Like, they just, like, working in the entertainment industry, it just happened to be their job. And just because you don't like what they do doesn't give you the right to attack them on a personal level, no matter who it is, no matter if it's, you know, Zach or Ben or Henry or anyone. Just because you don't like it, that's whatever. Like, if there's a genuine reason to bash Ben or Zach or anyone, then whatever. Like, we've sat here and, like, discussed our issues with Joss Whedon, but that's because there are issues to discuss with Joss Whedon. Like, there's some serious issues there. But with Zach, like, he made some movies people don't like. So what? Like, you don't have to go on saying how much you hate the guy and how much you want, like oh, like he probably wants his mother dead or whatever. Like, the stupid comments were made on Twitter.
In the States is because of the Zack Snyder movie. I mean, when I saw that article, I was so angry because you can blame this thing on Zack Snyder. It's just so dumb.
It is, and it's just, I just feel so bad for all these people. It's just, the way the media portrays like the tone of the DCEU, and it's not, again, not everyone has to like the DCEU. I've stated this before. Like, I don't care if you like the DCEU or not. Like, I've gotten along with people. I've had civil discussions with people who don't like the DCEU, and they're fine and normal people. But for whatever reason, when it comes to being online, people take that as a way of being like, oh, there's no responsibility for my actions, so I can just say whatever I want, and no one's gonna care. But it has an effect on people. Like, Zach came out and said he held out the news about Autumn because of what the internet was gonna say about him. And that's a terrible thing that he has to keep the fact that his daughter's dead a secret for so long because people are gonna shit on him for it, and they did, and they're celebrating Joss Whedon coming in. A guy lost his daughter, and they're just celebrating a guy coming in to finish a movie. Like, get a life, seriously. If you're just celebrating a director coming in over a guy losing his daughter, there's something seriously wrong with you.
Exactly.
I remember reading that statement and just feeling so ashamed of us as like a film critic community. Just the idea that he would have to go to that length, it's just like it's deeply like it's fucked up. It's not the way that this is supposed to run. Like
yeah,
it's an indictment of the humanity of fans.
The writer
that broke that's exactly it, Danielle.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Even the writer that broke the news about his family tragedy, I mean, he handled it very well. I thought the article was really well written, but then these fan sites and these people on Twitter were so vicious about the whole thing, and it sucks because the geek community is supposed to be united, and the misfits are all in it, and in the end they're not. They can be just as vicious as any other community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we have a lot. We get a lot of mileage out of this myth of the geek, the put upon geek, and the persecuted geek. And I think that, I mean, like, especially in the last 10 years, as someone who was a geek for, a couple decades before that, like, in the last 10 years, that's basically null and void. You're done. You don't get credit for being a geek at this point. It's over. Like, you should be happy it's over, but people are so attached to their little, like, weird fake oppression, where they're like, oh no, like, someone, I mean, like, in high school, like, high school was not easy for me as a person who, who was really out about that kind of stuff, and really, like, in your face about the fact that I was just really into all of this subculture stuff. And, but, like, these days, like, nobody even cares. And, I mean, like, we gotta stop pretending that this is some sort of special protected class, and we have to start being honest about the fact that we're going to have bullies in our midst. We're going to have people who do terrible things in our midst, and we're not all, sad little innocent put upon geeks. Like, that's not the reality. It never has been.
Well, that person was going very fast on their motorcycle.
Yeah, sorry.
That's right. No, and I completely
getting
agree.
Back
like,
to Ben.
Thank you. Done it again. All right.
And I completely agree. Like, and obviously, like, I'm only 22, so I've been like I've been into this. Like, what got me into, like, all of this stuff to begin with was Sam Raimi's original Spider-Man movie. That got me into superheroes in general. Like, I was aware of Superman kind of and Spider-Man kind of at the time, but it wasn't until that movie that made me, like, want to understand these characters more. And for me, it wasn't until that, like, I'm like, oh wow, like, there's so much more I can learn. And that was me being like 6-7 years old. And, like, once it wasn't until, like, Superman Returns rolled around that I started getting into DC and to Superman, and just being a fan at that point when Superman Returns came out, there was just Superman, Smallville, Batman Begins, and some of the X-Men and Spider-Man movies. And so there wasn't, like, too much to really delve into. And those movies were kind of few and far between at the time. There wasn't, like, 4 or 5 comic book movies a year. It was still kind of like maybe one a year, one every other year kind of thing going on. And as a fan at the time, I was just a kid enjoying it. And then as I was getting older, I started noticing the kind of the vitriol that comes with people being like a geek and being in the fandom of DC and all that stuff, and like looking at like Smallville and Superman Returns and stuff, and back when like YouTube first became a thing, and looking at the early comment sections and just seeing how vicious people started being. And these are people who like you would probably go on to say that they were like picked on in high school for all this stuff, and they're saying all these mean and vicious things. It's just because they have an outlet where they don't get recognized and don't have any responsibility for the things they say. They think it's okay to say whatever they want, and it's been like that for a really long time, and it sucks. It's, again, these people who probably would have sworn that like they were bullied or picked on or whatever are now, it's almost like a circle of life kind of thing. Like now they're the bullies, and they're the ones saying all these mean, vicious things about people that they don't even know. Like, again, you can have an opinion about a person, whatever, but the way that people have attacked those involved in the DCEU is so, it's, I don't understand where that comes from. Like, was your childhood really that traumatizing that somehow you think that Zack Snyder ruined it somehow because he didn't make a movie you liked? Like, is your ego so fragile that you think that just because he didn't make this version of Superman and Batman that you wanted, that somehow your life is now ruined and you must take out all of that frustration out on a man? Like, that's pathetic. It's pathetic.
Jump on the bandwagon. It's a cool thing now. Which is part of the reason for that. But it is an extremely unfortunate aspect of our society that when we are granted a certain bit of anonymity, somehow we seem to lose our own moral code and and ideas about the way things should be done. This is why they didn't allow face paint at games, in my high school, because once the face paint was on, people got weird. That's why masks aren't allowed at Halloween in certain places. There's a reason for it, because once you have that little bit of anonymity, suddenly you get really, really vicious. And I don't know what it is, something about our humanity or our lack of it, but here we are on the internet, and you're exactly there again. Oh, look, you've got a little code name, and you can say whatever you want, and there's really no accountability for it. And so this starts to come out. But in the end, the DCEU, I'm not saying there aren't people who just despise it with everything in them, because there are those. There's always those. But it has become the, whipping child. It has become the thing to pick on these movies. That's how you prove you're cool and in the know. And, that's hard to fight.
Yeah, but that was that reminds me of because I just kind of resaw this the other day, of that one. I think she's some kind of journalist or something. She's the one who came out and said that Zack Snyder probably hates his mother or something like that.
Oh,
remember
good
that?
Lord, yeah, that was embarrassing. Woman.
That was amazing.
Yeah, and then she came out on Tumblr and was trying to defend what she said about saying she was just trying to be funny, and she kind of admitted to jumping on the hate bandwagon without even knowing who he was, and well, that backfired a lot, didn't it?
Don't do that.
Yeah, and then the day after she said that was when the news came out about Autumn. And it's see, the things you say have a weight to them. You can't just say whatever you want just because you think it's funny. And obviously, no one thought it was funny.
Yep. Yeah, we have to be better.
And then she's like,
have to be better.
And then she's like, oh, I didn't know about Zach's mother. I didn't know that there were so many people of color and women in the DCEU fandom. I just thought they were all white boys, and because that's just what I deal with on a daily basis. And again, and I'll admit,
you don't even have to do your research. You just have to not say
pay
things
attention.
like that.
And
not that hard.
Be a decent person. It's not hard.
It's some people just take it to a whole new level, and that's why I feel bad for Zach and Ben, especially because I feel like they're the two who can deal with the most of that flack. Henry, it seems like he's the most genuine, and we kind of had this brief discussion right before we started, because Henry he posted on Instagram earlier today talking about the flaws he made in his own life and how he's kind of striving to be better, and then he kind of introduced Instagram to his new girlfriend, I assume. And we had a very in-depth discussion about this right before we started recording, but just to me, again, Henry handles that well, so it seems like Henry doesn't allow that drama to kind of come into his life. But when you see Zach and Ben were like, you see them struggling with whatever it is. With Zach, he's dealing with the death of his daughter. Ben's dealing with substance abuse. Like, they each have their own demons that they're struggling with. And the general public just won't leave them alone. And I feel so bad for these guys because they're just trying to leave their life and trying to better themselves. And people are just getting gung-ho about movies, and they just won't leave them alone. I just feel bad for
them. They're doing the best that they can.
Yeah,
and even in spite of substance abuse, Ben's dealing with, the fact that his family has fallen apart, and that's gonna make a difference too. I remember distinctly him discussing how his little boy, he talked to him about being Batman, and every time he went off to work, you look out for Joker. I mean, so cute, so you can tell he's a dad. He enjoys being a dad, and now he's dealing with the fact that he doesn't live with them every day anymore. That is going to weigh on you. This man has a life, he's got feelings, and he's doing the best that he can. He's flawed like the rest of us, but just because somebody's famous or in a movie doesn't suddenly mean that they that it's okay to go out of your way to vent some of your feelings on them. You need to be better than that. We need to be able to realize that there are people out there, and in general, in a whole, we seem to suffer from a very large lack of empathy as a society at this point in time, and it's not good. So we need to develop a little bit more empathy and remember that people have feelings and that they have their own struggles. And, we just need to be more decent. So, Ben especially, I don't know, do you guys remember that video he did way back when for the ice water challenge, Oh my gosh, I laughed myself stupid at that because it was so adorable. Like, the minute Jen dumped it on him, he freaked out and jumped at the but took her with him. And their little girls in the background, like, laughing hysterically. And I was like, oh my gosh, what a cute family, and then it fell apart. And I was like, oh, that poor man, poor Jen, poor him, poor everybody, it's not fun to go through a divorce or to be involved in it in any way as any party of it. So please don't go out of your way to, beat on people who are already just doing their best to try to make a living. I mean, come on. So yeah. Okay, I'm done.
No, yeah, and that's what like when I was at Comic-Con like a little over a month ago, and I saw the Justice League cast. Ben looked especially happy. Like, he wasn't necessarily the most vocal person there because, that was all Ray Fisher. He was the one hyping everyone up. But, Ben, he just looked like he was genuinely happy. And it wasn't like, it didn't look like he was putting on a face or he was just, like, putting on a face because he had to be there. He looked like he was genuinely happy to be a part of that and to be surrounded by so many people who are there because they want to see him, And, and when I was there, I was one of the many people who shouted, we love you, Ben, just showing that, like, because I was in the midst of everything going on about him, the people saying that he was leaving and all that stuff. So I just wanted him to let him know, like, even if whether he heard me or not, that I just wanted him to know that, like, hey, we as fans support you no matter what. So,
appreciate you,
like, we love him as Batman, but we're gonna love him as a person as long as he's a good person. Like, he's made mistakes like any other person. Like, his marriage ending, like, it did come out that he did come out and cheat on his wife, and that's not cool, of course.
Yeah,
there's consequences for that.
Yeah, and I'm not saying like I'm not forgiving him for cheating on Jen. That was all him. That's a mistake he made, and he's living with it. And that's
Does that mean you?
Not perfect.
And he's not, and we're not claiming that he's perfect or that any of these people are perfect. But they're human beings. They're allowed to be flawed. But Ben, he's never been like ill-willed person. Like he's never been like a physical abuser. I mean, granted, cheating is one of the worst things you can do in terms of when you're being in a relationship. But he never gave up on his family, and that I think is important, especially in Hollywood, because I feel like in some instances, like certain parents will just kind of give up and then just pay child support the rest of their lives, But Ben, and for the last 2 years now, ever since that first came out. Like, he's been there with Jen, being a parent to his kids, and that's admirable because he, no matter what, he was willing to be there. Now that he's in a relationship with someone new, but also still being he's just like any one of us. Like, he made a mistake and now he's living with it, but he's also still doing his best to kind of keep his life and his family together, and I can just applaud him for that. I really can.
And to be a dad, this is the thing. Like, it says a lot that after his divorce, he's still maintaining those links with his children, that he hasn't just up and bailed. That it happens so often, and no, he still wants to be a part of their lives. He still gets on with his ex-wife in order to make sure that their children are well cared for and have both of their parents in their lives in some aspect. That says a lot.
Yeah.
You have to work hard to do that. It doesn't just happen.
Yeah, and again, I just, not to sound like, again, like I keep saying the same thing, but I just, none of these people deserve it. I want them to be able to live their lives and be in these movies without such fan hate and fan vitriol.
Yeah.
Just from people who are entitled and feel like just because they don't like a movie that somehow their lives are somehow ruined by these movies. It's just a frustrating thing to deal with as a DCEU fan.
You need to get a life a little bit if a film ruined your life. Just saying, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so we're gonna go back to Ben's acting.
Yeah.
And Todd's acting. Danielle, was that you who said you wanted to talk about the Martha moment? Because I'm so.
Oh yeah, I have so much to say about that.
Let's do this thing. I'll talk about
No,
that.
this is probably, I would say, like, if we're being really technical, because I think Henry gets really close to tears in Man of Steel, but we don't actually see him cry. This is the second time that I've seen a male superhero cry on film. And I think that's what was most important to me about the Martha moment, is that, like, he's in literal tears during this moment. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so powerful. Like, it's the one reason that I can't throw Deadpool completely in the trash, because I mean, it's really, really important in terms of, like, how these films shape masculinity and how they model masculinity to especially the younger people in the audience. That's really significant, and I think that it's a huge part of why the Martha moment gets so much crap, is because it's hard to watch in the best way. Like, it's hard to watch because you're really intimate with the uncomfortableness and the pain in that moment. And I think that that's a testament to Ben's performance, is that it is achingly real and upsetting to watch, because you're going through something really weird and unexpected with him. Like, it's not the note you expect. Like, I think that everybody was sort of, like, tinged by their expectations in that moment, where they were like, okay, well, you know, this ends, and then, you know, something happens to help them understand each other, and then a thing happens that I don't think anybody could have predicted. And I think that that's what makes it feel sort of incongruous in the movie, but I like that feeling. I think that it makes it really genuine art.
I don't really see any other way. It's just me. I don't see any other way for that conflict to have truly ended without that particular connection. Because I just, even if Doomsday had shown up while they were fighting and they agreed, okay, we'll just not, you know, fight with each other right now and then go fight the big nasty creature, you know, either they keep the ending and Superman dies and nothing is ever resolved, and then he feels bad, but he only feels bad because Superman died. Or he lives, and then they get back, and, I mean, what are they supposed to do? In a TV show, that suddenly everybody'd be happy and everybody all hunky-dory, everything's great because they fought the monster together, but it resolves nothing. It doesn't address at all the 2-year
it's a Marvel
obsession,
movie.
The issue. Exactly. Well, and there are TV shows that I will not name right now, but, you know, like... that is how it would go. But this one, it was, I mean, Zach is deliberately trying to make a point that it is not good when you start to view someone as unhuman. Mm-hmm. You know, that is the entire point of the whole thing. You know, you're never a man, and, you know, you all that kind of thing. He doesn't view this guy as a person. And so to suddenly have to connect on the fact of their mothers, which coincidentally even in the comics have the same freaking name, nobody's ever pointed it out. You know, that's really cool to me. But I think the best part about it all was the fact that and I'm not dissing Henry's performance at all, because it was gorgeous. That whole moment is gorgeous to me. But the fact that Ben, like, I can never get over the fact that he looks off to the side the minute after Clark says that. You know, he says Martha, and he looks around because he's immediately expecting a trap of some kind. This is it has to be a trick. He knows who I am. He knows about my parents. You know what I mean? All of that is what comes out, and he looks around, because there's no way that it could be anything else in his mind. This guy isn't human. He's an alien. And so it's such a beautiful moment of contact, and it's not, I've seen it compared to the Bucky and Steve moment so much. And again, that is also a beautiful moment, but it's because their past is a shared past, so they can connect on that. What makes people uncomfortable and what makes them want to make fun out of it is two men connecting with each other over the fact that, for all intents and purposes, they are human. They both have mothers. They both have feelings. They both care about people in their lives. That is soft, squishy stuff that people don't want to see in their male superheroes because they need testosterone and masculinity. And that is a bad thing, in my estimation, that our society has been shaped to this point where you're uncomfortable watching one man realize that another one is human and watching both of them connect over that point. This is a bad thing. You should be going, hey, we need some more of that. But instead, we get a lot of ridicule and hatred for it because, ooh, that makes me uncomfortable. That's weird. I don't like it. Ooh, that flies in the face of everything I've ever been taught. Guys are supposed to go out, bone lots of chicks, and fight a lot. That's what we do. We're guys, That's not what we should be doing, guys, And so that moment I find so very, very beautiful. And then also, just because I am on this topic and I'm going to mention it, I didn't realize till like the fifth watching, which was eons ago, but Batman v Superman, that it's actually really a kind of amazing when Bruce freaks out and is screaming at him and stuff like that. It cuts down to Clark's face, and he's grimacing because he's standing on his chest. But then Lois comes in and Clark's entire face changes. So I should have brought this up last week during the romance thing. But he goes from grimacing because he's getting stepped on to his eyes are completely wide and holy crap, now my woman's in danger, So
full-blown panic.
It was it was complete and total holy crap, I'm helpless and I can do nothing to help her and she's running into the middle of this because she's Lois, and and it was just everything about it was such a beautiful moment that I still to this day am like, really? You want to ridicule that? That says something to you about you as a person, in my estimation, if you don't recognize the beauty in that moment. That's the moment that stuck with me when I went home after watching it the first time. That's the moment that I went to bed at night and it was playing again behind my eyelids. That's the moment that I went back to see it again the next day. I wanted to see it build to that moment again. That moment is a beautiful moment, and I do not tolerate Martha disrespect in my house. So,
and I think
Ben made it beautifully, and so did Henry. The direction was amazing. I love that scene, and Ben brought it home. Thank you, Ben. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
No, yeah, and I think a lot of the I think people just look at that scene on a very superficial level of like, oh, it's just two people have the same mom, their moms have the same name, and that automatically makes them best friends. That means you're not paying attention to the scene, because that's not what happened at all. Like, they form an uneasy alliance by the end of it. They're not like, oh, hey, let's be best buds and fight this monster together. Oh, yay, let's hold hands. No, that's not what happened at all. Like, Clark looked uneasy trusting Bruce. Like, when he says that Martha won't die tonight, he still looks uncomfortable with the situation. He's not exactly happy, like, oh, this guy just killed me. Oh, but now we're best friends. Oh, thank God. Like, he's not saying that at all. He's still uneasy. And then, like, and in that scene, people fail to understand that in this interpretation of the Wayne murder, in previous incarnations, we hadn't really seen Martha do much except get shot in the infamous shot of the pearls falling. But in this scene, she stands up in front of the killer, and obviously she gets shot, but she steps up and does something, and that resonates with Bruce. And when Bruce, like, when he hears his mom's name, he thinks of his mom as that person who was willing to step up and do the right thing in that moment and defend her child. Like, obviously, in most incarnations, like, the dad kind of steps in front and tries to do something, but also, like, in most instances, Martha kind of sat on the sidelines and got shot, but no, like, this Martha did something, and you can kind of tell that had a huge impact on Bruce. So when he hears his mom's name from an alien, and he's, like, taken aback, and he's, like I said, like, looking around, like, what's going on? Like, something, you're right, it must be a trap. because why else would he be saying his mother's name? And then,
well, it's also a trauma connection. I mean, like it's his father's last word. So I mean, like it's going to be intimately connected in his head to that moment. And that moment, I mean, like he goes right back to it. And I think that's what's beautiful about the performance is that we could have left the scene for much more time. We could have gone full-blown flashback and lost the power of that performance. But I think that's the power of the direction, is that he really trusted Ben to get us there emotionally. He trusted Ben to take us on that journey. And I mean that's the reason that we crack open his helmet, is so that he can get that done without having to act through a giant big piece of metal. His face is half exposed thematically because, there's all sorts of like baggage there, and there's lots of reasons to crack that face open. And I think it's one of the coolest things that they do in the fight. But like, it's also so that Ben can do his fucking job and do it amazingly. Just kill that performance and just, to take us through that moment of him being triggered and him having a PTSD reaction and having an epiphany, like really realizing like the depths to which he is sunk and who he is in this scene. The way that he saw this scene is not the way that the scene is actually playing out.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Completely agree.
Yeah, and also Zach does, during the whole movie, he does a really good job in building the fact that Bruce is traumatized with what happened, which is something that has been touched on previous movies outside of the DCEU, but not to this level, to Bruce trying to move on from the fact that his parents died, basically protecting him, but in the end he can't, because the whole situation left him traumatized. So Zack made the choice of I'm going to show you Bruce's mental state during the whole movie, and when this moment happens and when Ben shows what he's thinking about in his face, you buy the fact that he connects with Clark because he sees him for the first time as a human being and not just an alien with superpowers.
And he realizes how far he's gone. That is such a beautiful moment. I do not understand why people don't get it. I really think I don't know, if you like fed people truth serum and sat them down and actually questioned them, I think you would find that many of them actually see that in it, but they are afraid to acknowledge that, so they default to the I'm going to make fun of it and stay on the bandwagon, because it would be lame to admit that it touched me or that I found it beautiful or that I at least understood where they were going with it, but that's just, so. I need to go find the truth serum now.
And also, like how Danielle was saying, that scene is also kind of supposed to make you feel uncomfortable, especially with what Bruce is trying to accomplish in that scene by trying to kill Superman.
Yes, thank you. That's
at this point, like,
fight.
because like the movie is called Batman v Superman, so they're gonna fight, but up until that scene, like you don't think, oh, Batman's not actually gonna kill Superman, and then you get there and he's like, oh, he's really about to do it. Like you would not up until that point you're like, oh, no, he keeps saying it, but he's not really gonna do it, and then you're kind of confronted with that reality, like, oh, Bruce Wayne is like, Batman is willing to go there, and then it's not until he hears his mother's name that it takes him back, and like you guys said, like he sees him more than just an alien at that point. He realizes, oh my God, this is, again, for lack of a better phrase, he is a human being. He's not this benevolent alien who I've made him out to be. That there's like he is thinking to himself that I've made a mistake. Like I've become the thing I've been fighting against, and that's why he throws the spear and he gives up. And that's when realizes the error of his ways, and obviously, like, it goes back to, you know, Clark is still uneasy with that whole situation by the end of it. Like, even when Bruce says he's gonna go find Martha, he was gonna ignore him and says, "No, my mother needs me."
Yep.
Like, he was gonna go without Bruce. Like, he still doesn't trust him. I wouldn't trust him either. If someone tried to kill me and then be like, "Oh, don't worry, I got your mom," I'm like, no. Like, I think go ahead.
That's the thing about that fight is that, I mean, I think that that's half the beef that people have with Snyder is that they showed up for a fun night at the movies to watch two dudes punch in suits punch each other, and not have to think about why or how that happened or, you know, why we should care, and transforming that fight into something that's hard to watch and something that is a kind of a personal tragedy. Like, everything that happens in that fight is a personal tragedy for him. Probably one of the most traumatic experiences that Clark's ever had. But on top of that, you have basically, it's a whole fight that's just the darkest point of Bruce's life. I mean, it's the darkest he's ever gone. It's the furthest he's ever pushed himself, and it's him acting out his trauma on someone else, and it's not fun to watch. And I think that's the greatest thing about this movie. It was the one thing I was really concerned about. I didn't want to have us few heroes have a slugfest and then have everybody be cool with that. Have everybody be like, "Oh yeah, that was awesome." Like, no, it shouldn't be awesome. It should absolutely not be awesome.
Completely agree. And you're right. The whole fight, we're watching Batman go further and further down the rabbit hole, and so many viewers are like, "But that's not my Batman. That's not my Batman." No, it's
exactly
not.
That's the
this
point.
is the
That's
entire
the point.
point.
Exactly.
This is not our Batman. We all know it. We're watching it, going, "Dude, don't do it. What are you doing? You're going too far. You're right." You know, and to watch him pull back and stop, realize how far he is, and then be inspired by this same person that he tried to kill, and go put together people in his honor. See, that is story I'm here for. Justice League, that's going to be my Batman. We all know it because we're like, "Oh yeah, he's pulled himself back from the brink. Awesome." You know, but yeah, this one is not supposed to be our Batman. We are never supposed to go, "Oh yeah, that's totally Batman. That's my Batman. That's the guy from the comics." You know, he's pulled from the comics, but he's going too far. We all know it. So, anyway.
Which is exciting, it was exciting to see the new Justice League trailer, because you can see that Bruce is still affected by the fact that he almost killed Superman, and the fact that Superman dies at the hands of Doomsday affects him to the point that, no, we need to be better, we need to build, we need to save this world in the name of him, because we don't have that beacon anymore. And I feel responsible for what I did, and for the fact that I feel guilty that I almost killed him.
Yep. It's a beautiful, beautiful character arc. Honestly, I'm delighted to see it, and I'm so excited because he already looks better in Justice League. You're looking at him going, "Oh my gosh, he's pulled himself back. He's figuring things out." You know,
Exactly.
Look at that. He's taking people into his life again. You know, he's working with other people instead of shutting himself off. This is gonna be awesome. So yeah, it's really exciting to see that character grow, and Ben's doing a great job on all accounts.
Most transparent too, the way he is with Barry, I think, in the scenes we've seen so far. The sort of soft bewilderedness of him is so
love it.
He's so bat dad. It's so perfect. Absolutely what I wanted.
Oh yeah, and you can see
wait
he's like
to
in
that.
movies to see these like foster parents. He did not totally that. Oh, he is? Okay, no, fine. You know, but he is. He's just gonna take him under his wing. I cannot wait for this, you guys. November can't come
Got me
fast
too.
enough.
Yeah, and again, and that's why I appreciate Zach's filmmaking so much, because he's not just going film to film and abandoning the characterization of the previous film. Like in this latest Justice League trailer, you see, like Amber said, like you see that he's still affected by Superman's death. Like, because it was partially his fault. Like, he was willing to do that and take Superman from the world. Now that there is a world without Superman, he feels somewhat responsible, and that's ultimately why he and Diana are forming the Justice League. And now he has the opportunity to bring this team of people together to be the beacon that Superman once was. For him, that's his way of honoring Superman's memory, and that's not like a cheap abandonment of a character's story. Like, where you have, again, not to keep bringing Marvel up, but if you look at, like, Iron Man 3, like, that was, to me, it wasn't the best Iron Man movie, but I liked it as a movie. And by the end of it, Iron Man, like, blows up all of his suits for Pepper. He's giving up being Iron Man for Pepper. And then Age of Ultron, he's back to being Iron Man, and him and Pepper broken up, so the whole movie essentially means nothing.
Yeah, it felt that way. I would say Iron Man 3 to me felt like a really awesome Tony Stark movie.
Yeah.
It's a great Tony Stark movie because he was stripped of all of that and had to figure out who he was without the suit and all the different things. And in the end, he decides he's, Iron Man inside and he's Tony Stark. It's cool. It's a great movie. But I agree. Then we came back and suddenly Pepper's out and he's got suits everywhere. And it was like, wait, what happened? There wasn't enough connection to explain to me what happened between one film and the next. And I completely agree. This happens a lot. It's not just Marvel. So it happens all the time in films. It drives me crazy. And it's really exciting to see that go really, really close and make sure that one movie has built off the next and in a way that you can truly see it, and it's so interconnected. That is a thing of beauty to me. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've come to the point where we don't even recognize what character development looks like from film to film anymore. Like, everything has to have a bow on the end.
Yeah.
And that bow, I think, is really... It's really disappointing, and it's detrimental to this idea that people grow and change over time, and that's a problem. Like, you have to start with characters at a certain point, and then they have to progress in some direction. And if you're really, really focused on making this a Saturday morning cartoon and getting them back to their original state, then yeah, you're going to be really confused by these particular films. You're going to be really, really, really like thrown off by this approach. But there's room for both approaches. Like, I like a Saturday morning cartoon. I like watching people get their head cut off at the end of Highlander. Someone doesn't get their head cut off, I'm upset. But that's what I've come to expect from that kind of entertainment. And there's two different, it's two different modes of entertainment. And this one is the latter. This one is, really investing in the characters and building them painstakingly over time. And that is a much more effort-intensive process.
Hey, actually, right, like, here's a question I have about, like, current movies that, like, but just current movies in general, especially when applied to the way people react to the DCEU, which is about how current movies, it's not just about keeping the characters in the exact same place in their character arc as they were before, but also about always ending the movie on kind of a closed note. It's not just about, like, character arcs, but also about plot. It's about, like, everything coming together at the same time. It's about having, like, a movie series, and every movie has to be a standalone on its own somehow, even though it's a sequel to another movie. Like, it's a kind of an issue I had with Wonder Woman, actually, about how, they just seem to, like, very neatly sidestep the question of Diana mentioning that she walked away from humanity 100 years ago. They just seem to gloss over that in favor of, like, tying the movie up with a nice little bow at the end and saying that, she discovered the power of love or something, and so it made her Wonder Woman. But according to what she said, she walked away, right? And, like, it's a concern I've come up with
I think that
with movies. Yeah.
With Wonder Woman, for me at least, when I watched it, and they didn't explicitly say, no, she walked away from Micah because of this. I thought that she just retired from using the armor, from being Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
But I think that she didn't abandon humanity, So
yeah, but
it's more
that's
like...
the thing. Like,
she navigated
could have
in the
mentioned it.
shadows.
That's the thing. They
Something
could
like
have
that.
spelled it out, but they didn't. I felt like they just very deliberately didn't. And we can try to explain it away in all the different ways that's possible. And obviously, those are all really valid if we come up with, like, people have come up with a lot of different ways to explain why Wonder Woman might have walked away, why she might not have walked away, in what way she might have qualified as walking away while still retaining this model.
Yeah.
But they could have spelled it out. You know, they spelled it out in BVS, and they just kind of cut that out of the Wonder Woman movie. And I felt like it was just part of that whole making it stand alone in the DCEU. And I don't have a problem with that like Wonder Woman is a movie on its own, but you know, in terms of connecting it to the wider DC universe, it's just and like it's part of a trend of like the way what people have come to expect from movies nowadays, which, you know, for example, like Star Wars The Last Jedi, everyone is freaking out because because they're worried that the movie might end on a depressing note or something like that. But isn't that what we come to expect from Star Wars Episode 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, the middle one.
That's
Yeah.
the standard
You know,
trilogy.
It's a trilogy, so I don't know why people are so hung up on not getting a happy ending for one movie. You know, it's like, yeah, maybe it's just
weird.
something
It's
about
like-
what we expect as viewers nowadays. You know, like maybe like every movie has to end with a happy ending. Every movie has to end with the heroes winning their battle. You know,
It's like fans have become these like these ravenous babies, and
Yeah.
that like we need to be like
Yeah.
placated into seeing the next movie. And if you don't please your audience in specific ways, then they're going to try and punish you by, you know, either organized campaigns of harassment or by like refusing to see the next film. And it's like, it's not that heavy, guys. Like,
Yeah.
it's really just not that heavy. And it's kind of a delight to be surprised or upended by a storyteller. And that experience is something that, you know, I mean, like, as a literature teacher, like, I have to work my students into, like, being upset by a book is good. It is a good feeling once you get used to it. The first time it's terrible because you're used to, you know, films patting you on the butt and sending you along. But that's not going to happen all the time, and that should be a good thing.
And sometimes they're trying to make a point. Exactly. I mean, that should be a good thing. And often, if I find myself really upset by something I've read or watched or done or something like that, I have to sit back and get through those feelings first before I can decide why I'm upset.
Yes.
And often it's simply a matter of I missed the point, and only after I get through the emotional reaction do I look back and go, okay, why are they depicting it like this? Why are they making those choices in this story to get that result? There has to be a reason. And then
or
I
maybe you
suddenly am like,
didn't miss
oh my
the
gosh,
point.
okay, I see the point. I'm still upset, but I understand why you did that. But that takes me time sometimes, and sometimes it takes a bit to back off. But I do agree that being surprised is wonderful, because unfortunately I've imbibed so much in my life that often it's like, oh, I see what's coming. Oh, I see what's going to happen. Oh, I see. And so I'm delighted when I sit down and suddenly they just like slap me upside the face and I'm like, holy crap, I didn't even see that at all. I mean, that's great, because I need that sometimes. So,
Well, I think
and you're
also
right.
sometimes
Yeah.
that upset feeling comes not because you missed the point, but because you were meant to feel upset, and that's
True.
okay. Like,
this is true.
I have had
All right.
movies like The Dark Knight, the first time I watched it, ruined my life. I can say that. It ruined my life. For 3 days, I was useless. Like,
Okay, why?
I distinctly remember going to work afterward and going through the motions and thinking, what is this? What is happening? What am I doing with my life? Like, having a total existential crisis in response to this film.
Okay.
And it was because I was complacent, and it was because I was ready to jump on board with things that I shouldn't have been jumping on board, and things were wrong in my life at that moment. And I needed to fix them. I needed to do something. But I never would have seen that in my life unless I'd actually gone through the experience of that movie. If that movie hadn't just, like, destroyed me.
Interesting. Very cool.
In the best way. Like, I think, like, I think I think narrative should be allowed to destroy you every once in a while. I think that sometimes you need to be obliterated.
I would agree with that. And I've had many a shakabuku, or, swift spiritual kick to the head through fiction, but you have to allow it, too. If you just get angry and start hating on it, then you won't get as much from it. You just won't.
Sometimes learning hurts.
Yeah.
On that note, I have to run out the door because I have to go to work.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it. It was a fun discussion. Like I really enjoyed everything you guys had to say. So thanks, Danielle, for taking the time to come out and talk to us today.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, no, have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Right, bye.
All right, and so I think on that note, we could probably, unless you guys had anything else to say, we could probably go and end things there.
Yep, I think
Oh
that's
man,
good.
everyone's signing out already.
Yeah, no.
I've worn myself out.
All right, so again, if you guys want me, the rest of you that are here at least, we're going to go back around, kind of reintroduce you guys to the podcast.
Amber, this was really fun and really exciting. Thanks for having me. And you can find me on Tumblr at by Witch of the West.
Yep, thanks everyone. You can find me at Badgeactivity on Tumblr.
Hey, I'm Lily, and you can find me on Lily Loves Comics on Tumblr.
I'm Katie, and you can find me at Story Advocate on Tumblr.
And then, of course, you guys can find me here at YouTube at Nerdy Nick. Look me up on True Man of Steel on Tumblr, True Man of Steel on Twitter. That's where I do a lot of my DCEU stuff, as well as on Tumblr. Thank you guys for listening, and thank everyone here for joining us. Amber, thanks again for joining us. It was really nice having you on for your first podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nick, this was great.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Yeah, and hopefully we can have you on for more podcasts
Same,
in the
guys.
future. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
All right. And good.
I would love it if you guys will have me.
No, yeah. I mean, the more the merrier. That's why I keep inviting all these
Exactly.
more people to the podcast. Is more intelligent people to add to the discussion.
Yeah.
All right, so again, thanks you guys for joining us, and I'll talk to all of you guys soon. All right, and to everyone listening, thank you so much for listening. If you guys liked what you see here, go ahead and hit subscribe to the subscribe button below. You can listen to all of our other previous episodes that are up on my channel. Last week we discussed the importance of love in the DCEU. You guys should check out the most recent episode, as well as any of the other videos on my channel as well. Again, thank you guys so much, and until next time, have a good one.